Hello everybody, and thanks for watching this recorded presentation, When Dams Go Bad. This is going to be my attempt to repeat our session from the June 4th Stormwater Training Program titled Fundamentals of Success, Past, Present, and Future, which was a training program delivered by the Maryland Department of the Environment and funded in part by the Chesapeake Bay Regulatory and Accountability Program. My name is John Roach. I'm a senior engineer with the Dam Safety Division at MDE, and I'm going to talk to you about dam removal project planning, permitting, and present a case study of a project that was recently completed in 2019, a successful project at that. So, as an introduction, dam safety and dam removals all revolve around, in some sense, the high costs of maintaining dams and repairing dams and keeping them up to current design standards. Recently, the Army Corps of Engineers released their National Inventory of Dams update, which showed that there are about 90,000 dams in the country that are of regulatory or jurisdictional size, which is roughly equivalent to anything that is greater than a Maryland 378 small pond. And of those 90,000 dams in the country, about 20% of them are high hazard. The NID also showed us that the average age of dams in the country is about 56 years. And for dams constructed of various engineering materials, 56 years is quite a long time and can be beyond the lifespan that we can expect from a lot of those materials. The Association of State Dam Safety Officials recently released a scorecard, so to speak, about the costs of dam rehabilitation and upkeep throughout the country. And they pegged the unfunded need for dam rehabilitation and upgrades at $70 billion throughout the country. A few years ago, they broke that same number out state by state, using some logic to predict what the costs each state would have to bring their dams up to current standards. And in Maryland, the number was about $210 million, which is needed investment to bring our dams up to current standards. That's quite a bit amount of money. In Maryland, it's further complicated by the fact that about 50% of our dams are privately owned, meaning it could be a homeowners association, a private company, or even an individual citizen. And of course, when you talk about dam repairs and the high cost of repairs, for a private citizen or a homeowners association that maybe only collects a few dollars a month from the homeowners for general grounds maintenance, they don't have a rainy day fund in the hundreds of thousands of dollars or more to bring their dams up to standard. And in addition, when you look at the date of construction of many Maryland dams, it pairs pretty well with that average age listed in the NID of 56 years. It's roughly equivalent in Maryland. And as you can see, there's a big dam building boom in the 60s, maybe through the 90s and early 2000s in the state. But even still, a lot of those dams will be 20, 30, 40, 50 years old or more. And that causes a lot of problems. Here's a good example of a corrugated metal pipe spillway at one of the dams in the state. And, you know, the national transportation associations like AASHTO and those entities put a lot of culvert pipes in roadways and use corrugated metal pipes. And they've got pretty good numbers that say the average age of a corrugated metal pipe culvert can be about 35 years. But of course, at 35 years, that pipe has failed and it's rusted out just like this one here. In a dam situation, we don't want it to get this bad. So you can imagine that really dam lifespan of a CMP spillway is maybe more on the order of 20 years or even less in some corrosive soil environments. So we've got a lot of dams throughout the state of Maryland with metal like this. Now here's a few other examples of recent dams that we've come across and we've been asked to assist with. In the upper left corner, here's one where the spillway pipe has actually separated and caused a large sinkhole and void viewed from the crest of the dam, and that's going to require a complete removal and excavation of the dam embankment to replace that spillway pipe. On the bottom right, here's an example in Calvert County. This one's owned by a small homeowners association, and they've got a relatively large stormwater management facility that was constructed as part of their residential subdivision. The hooded riser here is off the hood of the riser, is off the riser pipe itself. We've got some beaver blockage, and that pipe has deteriorated. So on the crest and downstream slope off the picture, there's a few rather large sinkholes and internal erosion failures that are happening. So that one's going to cost the homeowner association a fair amount of money to rehabilitate. Now, we showed some of these pictures, but we don't want to make it sound like the Dam Safety Division goes out throughout the state, tries to find poor condition dams, and then sends the owners some nasty letters and causing them a lot of money. We recognize that when it comes to dam structures, relationships matter. When we work with dam owners to remediate their dams and bring them up to code, we know that we're going to be working with those owners over many years and decades even. So relationships matter. We don't want to go in with a hammer when a hammer is not needed. Conversely, when a hammer is needed, we are going to bring it to you. And we hope that in the end you kind of view us as your trusted advisor. So then when we recommend a repair or action on your dam, that you'll take notice and take proper action. We also recognize that dam repairs are quite expensive, and there is no state fund to assist private dam owners with these costs. That's further complicating matters for these aging dams. So we encourage persons or entities that own dams to start a rainy day fund as soon as they can. Maybe someday there'll be a fund, or there'll be other venues to recover costs for dam repairs or upgrades or removals, but at the moment there's no state fund. Now, when we do come and inspect a dam, I'm showing here a few levels of our enforcement. And to speak to what I was mentioning earlier, when we first visit a dam, we'll send you an inspection report and we'll ask for certain issues to be fixed within a timeline. We're trying to educate you on why this is important. And usually that gets most dam owners to comply, and they recognize that they have an asset and a liability in their dam, so they're happy to receive this information. For some dam owners, though, whatever reason, they don't take action. We'll start sending more stricter reports, we'll say. We'll try to set very specific actions and be a little more firm in our demands. And if that's further ignored, we'll take things further, all the way through a court action where we can work with administrative law judges to compel dam owners to take action. But we don't want to have to bring it that far. That's not our objective. And we would hope to work with you to solve dam problems before they come. Now, of course, sometimes, and we're speaking about dam removal, owners are proactive and they want to remove their dam, whether it's because of a known defect and they want to participate in something like a stream restoration project, or in some cases when we have a imminent failure condition. Let's say a big storm came through and the dam suffered some damage. We might jump straight to dam removal, at least as an interim process, until designs and repairs can be made to bring that dam back up to standards and make it safe. So why do people remove dams? Well, in our viewpoint, dam removal is an appropriate and preferred action in a number of situations. Sometimes that dam doesn't provide value to the owner or the users of the pool. Sometimes the maintenance costs or the ability of the owner to pay maintenance is greater than their ability or the value of the dam, the value that it provides for the owner. In some cases, the liability of ownership is too great for the dam owner. There's a hazard to public safety, whether it because the dam is a significant or high hazard structure, or maybe there's an overflow structure that creates roller type conditions where recreationists can get trapped and drown. In some cases, as I mentioned, there's a ecological decision point. The owner desires to take this blockage out, return the stream to a natural condition. Maybe there's some fisheries benefits to that. And lastly, as I mentioned, because in some cases the dam has been critically damaged and it's in danger of failure, and the best and most appropriate action is to safely breach it, either as a permanent solution or as an interim solution until appropriate repairs can be made. Now, it's important to remember in a dam project that there's lots of stakeholders, and they all bring unique perspectives, unique values, and unique benefits to an owner when a project starts to develop. So you want to be sure to involve the dam owner and users of that asset, whether it be somebody taking water, recreation, flood control, people downstream. In fact, they're actually benefiting from that dam. There's environmental nonprofits who might get involved. Maybe there are protected species, or there's a fishery that wants to be protected or preserved or enhanced by a dam removal. There's local politics that get involved, and usually that comes from a citizen level because dams are and ponds are emotional structures. People have an attachment to water, and they remember where they learned to swim or brought their grandchildren to fish for the first time. So there might be local citizens through their local politicians who are real vocal opponents. For older structures, there's historic preservation issues that might need to be considered. And then, of course, you have your state regulators and federal regulators as well, who will need to be involved in terms of permitting and resource protection. Now, you've assembled your team, you want to go ahead with removing a dam, so there's a lot of planning that needs to go into it. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that your planning is going to be extremely expensive or time-consuming, but you do want to make sure you take care of some of these questions before you get too far along. It's always better to have the answers when somebody asks, did you think about XYZ, than to have to say no and stop your process while you go collect more data. So you want to early on identify wetlands, rare, threatened, and endangered species that might be in the area, resources and habitats that the dam or the associated pond might provide. You'll want to get a handle on the sediment that's accumulated within the pond, the thickness of the sediment. If you're disposing of it, you might need to be aware of if there's any contaminants in the sediment that may pose an increased cost or increased difficulty for off-site disposal. You'll want to look at a few different alternatives for the breach and then the pond restoration, just so you have those in your back pocket sometimes so that you can adjust on the fly as the project goes through. You'll certainly want to consider the control of water during the breach. How are you going to pump the stream flow around or contain it? And likewise, you'll want to think about the control of sediment both during and after the breach. We mentioned the disposal of waste materials that includes embankment material or spillway pipes or masonry rubble if it's a masonry structure. And then at the end of the day, the goal would be to create a stable channel and returning natural non-invasive vegetation to the pond area to provide an ecological uplift for the area. Now, we've had a lot of questions in the past about what are our permitting requirements for dam removals, and I want to explain right now that they are pretty simple. We've got a policy that's going to be up on the dam safety webpage under the policy and guidelines section that describes this in some additional detail. But quite simply, for a dam removal project, we're asking applicants to consider removing a masonry or gravity dam fully. There's a legal principle called an attractive nuisance, where you as an owner can be liable if there's something that seems like it would be fun to jump off and get hurt, basically. So we want to prevent that liability. We remove the structures completely usually. For earth embankments, that's not as practical. They're usually much more massive, there's much more volume of materials in them, so we recommend excavating a stable breach channel, usually at the location of the original stream channel if possible. That excavated breach channel should usually extend down to natural ground with 2 horizontal to 1 vertical or flatter side slopes. It should include some kind of channel protection, and the size of the channel would be dictated by the 24-hour 100-year storm event. What we would like you to do is size that channel so that within the pond area there's 3 feet or less of water impounded during that storm event. Now on the right side of the screen here, I recognize that they're not really visible, but the point I wanted to get across was, here's an example of a permit plan set for a dam removal project. It was as simple as 3 pages and only a few extra pages of calculation, a cover sheet, a plan, and profile view. The total package was 9 pages, and the 6 remaining pages were really erosion and sediment control, notes and details as well. Now, there'll be other partners, whether that be the Non-Tidal Wetlands and Waterways program within MDE or the Army Corps of Engineers who might get involved in permitting as well. So I can't speak to their requirements, although it is important to note that the Army Corps of Engineers recently released a technical memorandum that described the loss of wetlands habitat, fringe wetlands within a pond, as a result of dam removals. And I think they had a really wonderful conclusion to this note that's worth remembering, is that overall, in accordance with the Clean Water Act, the idea is to enhance and uplift the entire system. So this dam removal, if done properly, will restore the stream to more natural conditions, provide for more riparian benefits and natural wetlands forming. So the loss of those fringe wetlands, which are really not high value in many cases, is acceptable to the Army Corps. So that was good news and should help permit projects as we go forward. All right, onward to the Martin Farm Dam project. This is one that we just finished off in early 2019, and now that it's been done, I can safely say that it was a good project. It wasn't always easy as it went on, but we found a hazardous dam, and over a course of time we remediated it. So let's describe it a little bit. The Martin Farm Dam is a privately owned earth dam constructed on what was a family farm in the 1960s in the Falston area. It's about 21 feet tall and had a 3.5 acre surface area pond, about 25 acre feet of storage at normal pool. It has a relatively small drainage area, 140 acres, and very little impervious in that area. And important to note, this is on Overshot Branch, which is a tributary to Little Gunpowder. So it's a Use 3 watershed, which means it's a cold water habitat that's capable of sustaining a trout population, and that's a pretty prized watershed. So there's some restrictions and some issues you have to deal with when you're working in those watersheds. At the same time, you can take advantage of that trout population, and sometimes there's funding or resources that might become available if your project enhances their habitat. I'll note right now that the pond was classified by us as a significant hazard dam, but it was originally constructed as a low hazard farm pond. Subsequent development in the area below the dam changed that hazard classification, and we'll describe that a little bit more as we go on. Back in the 60s, construction of a farm pond in particular was pretty easy in the state of Maryland. You'll see here it was only about 2 plans, 1 or 2 pages of calculations, and the yellow sheet of paper here is the approval from the predecessor to MDE Dam Safety, which was the Department of Water Resources. And basically what the approval said is that because this is a farm pond, you don't need a permit from the state of Maryland. Please construct it in accordance with the plans and specifications approved by the Conservation District, and have at it. Now, when an owner gets this and they've built their pond, there's really no follow-up. There's nothing to describe maintenance conditions or obligations of an owner. So unfortunately, there's a lot of older and aging farm ponds throughout the state of Maryland that are probably in similar condition as the Martin Farm Pond. And as we identify these, we'll have to work with the owners to remediate them in an appropriate manner. So while this dam was constructed in 1965-66 and filled in 1967, the Dam Safety Division was really unaware of it until 2016. Over the course of its lifespan, the owners occasionally corresponded with the Soil Conservation District in Harford County for some maintenance requests, but we weren't really involved and we weren't aware of the pond until we got a call. The call was pretty simple. Mom, which was what the son-in-law of the property owner called his mother-in-law, he said, Mom can't sleep. She's really worried that the dam's going to fail. It looks like beavers have blocked the spillway pipe and the water levels are rising close to the crest and we're concerned. Can you please come out and look at it? So we did. I went out and came to the dam, and I picked up my jaw off the ground after I kind of digested what I was seeing. I advised the owners that dam removal is really needed in this case. The cost and issues involved with fixing the dam is going to be quite extensive. And based on the conversations with the owner's family at that time, they fully agreed. They recognized that they had a bigger liability than an asset, and they were on board with removal right away. So I said, and we'll show some pictures to explain this, I said, if the seepage gets worse, call 911 right away. Please set up a siphon to lower the water levels. Let's take the pressure off this dam while we get geared up to do a repair job. I had no idea that the repair job would take about 3 years from the date of that first inspection. And as I was leaving the site, I had to stop and email my supervisor just to give him a picture and an update, and said, holy cow, this dam is one summer storm from breaching. That was a direct quote from my email. And fortunately, I was wrong. It never did breach, but it probably should have. It was in such poor condition, it's kind of amazing it didn't fail. We were lucky. Here's a picture of the dam as I saw it from my inspection. Isn't it a beaut, huh? As you can tell clearly here, I'm walking along the dam crest. That's the center of the photo, with the upstream embankment and pond to my left and the downstream embankment to my right. Wonderfully maintained structure, wouldn't you say? And here's the downstream slope. Nice mature trees have grown up, and we've got this large kind of hollowed out area on the downstream slope. You'll notice at the bottom of the picture there's a rusted out metal pipe. Well, that was the original corrugated metal spillway pipe. And that pipe is completely deteriorated and collapsed, so much so that it's caused an internal erosion failure of the dam embankment. And that has chewed through the embankment beyond where you can even see, because there's a root mat that's covering up probably another 10 or 15 feet of a void space under the dam. As I'm poking through this area, I'm finding anti-seep collars that were on the original principal spillway. They didn't really do much of a job. They didn't stop the seepage here in this case. So we've got a severe problem on the downstream slope of the dam, let alone the vegetation. We moved forward to the upstream slope of the dam and found the beaver blockages, and the owner showed that the water levels were only a few feet from the crest. Now here's a video I took a few days later when the owner said, hey, I got that beaver blockage out. Well, they took it upon themselves to rent a small excavator and dug out the entire riser down to its concrete base. Sure enough, there were no more beaver blockages, but of course now they've created unintentionally this significant problem on the upstream slope of the dam as well. Now here's a depiction I provided some folks of showing just about how much dam was removed either through erosion or excavation and how much was remaining. You see these steep vertical slopes which should be failing and high water levels, and we've got a really significantly weakened dam section that's going to hold this back. Clearly, there was a big problem that needed to be resolved. So, was dam removal appropriate? I think so. The dam wasn't used by the family. The maintenance costs were certainly greater than the value of the dam. They recognized that they had a hazard to public safety. We did go through and do a back-of-the-envelope dam breach analysis after these first inspections and determined that there were roads and potentially some houses downstream that would be in danger of a failure, hence the significant hazard classification I mentioned earlier. And yes, this dam is a perfect example of one that's been critically damaged and in danger of failure. So, we did eventually remove this dam. It took a few years and lots of effort, but let me touch on some of the keys to success for a dam removal project like this. We had a willing and eager owner, although they had a phrase that they loved to repeat to us. You can't get blood from a stone. Basically, they'd help out wherever they could, except when it came to any kind of funds. So we had to find a way to build a project from scratch. So first we built a team. We tried to identify people who would bring value to this project, and we looked at value with a really broad paintbrush. Folks like the Maryland DNR Fisheries Division brought value with their information on protected species in the cold water trout habitat and how we could do no harm or do as little harm as possible to that habitat. And likewise, how we could leverage that habitat maybe to identify some funding sources from nonprofit entities. And we brought in people like the Harford County Department of Emergency Services. And when you know you have a hazard that could result in loss of life or danger to public, and you have elected officials, I found that the best way to really get the elected officials' ears is to have the message come from their emergency management staff. Because the emergency management staff is the trusted representative of that local official, and they speak in language that makes sense for that municipality or that county. And when I told the emergency managers that we had a big problem, and then they saw it for themselves, and they communicated that to their county staff, the county staff clearly understood there was a problem. Now, we brought in all the rest of the stakeholders as early as we could as well, because we knew we'd have to coordinate on permitting, we'd have to coordinate on project scoping and development, and we'd have to make sure that the fisheries representatives didn't worry about the project and if it would cause harm. So we had frequent and open communication with all of those partners so that if we got money and when we got money, we'd be ready to go. We could be ready to build the project and make it happen. And I would want to say in this team building process, it's really important to identify, and usually this is somebody who kind of self-identifies, and it can change as the project develops, but identify a project champion. And this is somebody who, whether it's because it's their job duties or they have a personal concern or a personal mission, but there's somebody who's going to see this project from beginning to end. They are going to keep the momentum up when there is momentum. If momentum dies down, they're going to kind of rally the troops and be a cheerleader for the project. They're going to try to connect all the right people. They may not be the person that does all the work, but they're kind of the liaison and the person that tries to keep the project moving forward. And that's really important because in a long and complicated project, if you don't have that driving force, it's really easy to stall out and then just things don't go anywhere. Next, it was really important that in our communications, we talked about our motivating factors and our desired outcomes. And every stakeholder had a different factor that motivated them in this project and what they wanted to see. So from a dam safety regulatory side, we wanted to see, our motivating factor was regulatory compliance. We need a dam that is safe in accordance with Maryland laws and regulations, or one that's removed. That was our motivating factor. So our desired outcome was to see that the dam was taken out of service and that there was an elimination of the public safety hazard. The firm that eventually was more or less the project manager for the firm, which is Green Trust Alliance, and they're an environmental nonprofit that deals with ecological restorations and kind of identifying funding sources for work like this. This was a pilot project for them to show that dam removals coupled with stream restorations is a good way to capture value potentially for MS4 credits. So that was one motivating factor for them. And their desired outcome was to show that this project was viable and we could implement it in other areas to enhance environmental resources and protect the environment. So once we all knew those motivating factors and we had kind of a mutual understanding of our desired outcomes, it's important to convince key decision makers why this project warrants the costs that it does. Oftentimes these folks are non-technical, but they hold the money, so you have to show them the value of the project. For example, we're using this breach simulation here from HEC-RAS to just display the breach wave that would happen and where the water would flow, what houses and roads would be impacted. Because oftentimes people think the dam has been there forever. It's withstood so many storms. How could it ever fail? It won't fail. Nobody's in danger. There's kind of a head in the sand denial when it comes to dam safety. But when we show a simulation like this, it really drives the message home that there is a hazard. Failure can happen. And let's do something about it before the dam fails and we all have egg on our face. Another thing we did once we understood our motivations and outcomes was reassure project stakeholders, because not everybody, I would say most stakeholders were for this specific project, but some of them had very real concerns that we needed to address. So would we just come in here like cowboys and breach this dam and send sediment downstream at the worst time of the year and smother the trout eggs that have just been spawned? No, we're not going to do that. That's not our objective. So we need to reassure those stakeholders that we're going to do this project in a responsible manner. And when we do all of these things, we reduce the chances for surprises. And again, when a project like this happens, particularly when we have one missing element, in this case, funds, we want to have as little surprises as possible because we want to be ready to go once that last puzzle piece is available. Now, another factor you need to think about in these long and complicated processes is something that I call being patient and building patient. So from a regulatory perspective, we had to have lots of patience. This project took 3 years, nearly, but there was this undercurrent of potential dam failure at all times. So we were nervous. Don't get me wrong, we wanted this to come out as soon as we could, but we had to realize we had to build that team, identifying partners, identifying how this project is going to be delivered, identify sources of funding and then secure them, dealing with time of year constraints to make sure that the resources weren't adversely impacted when the project happened, and then things as simple as contractor scheduling. So it took a lot of patience. And fortunately, in this project, those actions by the dam owner to take out the riser, while detrimental to the stability of the embankment, did help lower the pond levels quite a bit. And prior to 2018, 2017 was a relatively dry year. So the lake level stayed really low, and it gave us some comfort level that there was very little pressure on the dam, and that if a big storm did come through, we'd probably be okay. Now, from a dam owner or project manager's side, it's important, therefore, to communicate the efforts that you're making. Show that you're making progress, even if it's small and incremental, but you're taking steps to reduce the risk and move the project forward. And that helps us as a regulator understand and have patience that we are going to work towards an outcome. It just takes time. Now, as I mentioned, those low water levels bought patience, but 2018 was a pretty wet year. And in spring of 2018, the water levels started rising, and they kept on rising. And we were only a few feet away from the crest of the dam with more rains coming in early May. And at that point, we ran out of patience. And that was okay. We ran out of patience, and dam safety staff took it upon ourselves to build a siphon to at least get some flow coming out of the dam. And some of us even paid for the equipment and materials out of our own pockets, not knowing if we'd be reimbursed. But we built the siphon, the rains came, the water levels held more or less where they were. So we avoided a disaster of an overtopping of the dam. And those actions that we took stepping back a little bit helped convince key decision makers that, wow, they were so concerned they went out and built this siphon and took these emergency actions on a Friday afternoon. I guess there really is a problem. So it worked well for us in the end. Lastly, it's important to be flexible and adaptive, both on a regulatory side and the engineer and contractor side in a complex project like this. As a result of this project, we've developed a few new policies and internal standard procedures and workflows to make sure that we are responding appropriately to the urgency of the situation and the needs of the situation. And we want to always be mindful that we need to be providing what we call regulatory certainty to the public, that they understand what they need to do to get a permit. It doesn't benefit anybody if there's dozens of levels of back and forth review because nobody's willing to share really what the objective is. So clearly communicating the need for a permit. That's why we've developed that policy and put it on our website. We also have to explore things like how can we make this project go a little smoother. We've got policies and we've got regulations that control the work. Oftentimes there's some little clauses in there that we can capitalize on. You know, if it's in the best interest of public safety, we can offer a variance from X or Y or Z. And when we've got a case like this Martindam, which was in imminent danger of failure and was severely deteriorated, we need to take advantage of those and help the project move along a little smoother. That's not to say we're not being responsible state employees and protecting the resources and the public. We're actually trying to take advantage of those loopholes. They were written for a reason, and make the projects go a little bit easier. Now, from an owner and engineer side, in return for some of that those variances and things like that, we need some guarantees and some assurances from the people doing the work that they are going to be good stewards as well in addressing some things like what are the sediment levels and how are we going to pump this down in a responsible manner, and what if there's more sediment here than we expected, or what if it's thicker, or what if it starts to move, what if rains come and we hadn't planned for that. So there's an element of proactive management, changing erosion sediment controls right away if you identify a problem. If you're in a cold water habitat and you see that you've got a real active spring that was hidden in the pond bottom, how can we protect that spring and shade it so that it stays cool for downstream waters? That kind of proactive management and stewardship is important. And when we build that relationship between the regulatory side and the contractor side, then I think we can be really productive and we can make things go a lot smoother. So that's always something to keep in mind as the project develops. If you've built a good team, you should have that rapport that makes this a lot easier. So here's a photo of the Martindam now that it's been breached. This is probably a day or two before all the work was more or less complete. As you can see, there's a little bit of riprap that still needs to be placed, but the project was successful. Overshot branch is now flowing freely for the first time since about 1965. We've managed to protect the resources, I think, pretty effectively. And that photo was late January, 2019 previously. Here's one from early May, so only a few months later. We've got a relatively stable stream channel. The pond bottom is getting nice and green. They're very hard to see in a photograph like this, but there's hundreds of saplings that were planted to help stabilize some of those sediments, provide a nice forested wetland type environment, habitat for animals. So it's a great project. I'm really happy to see it finished. It wasn't easy, but the end product is really satisfying. We've resolved the public safety hazard. I think everybody walked away with their objectives met, and it's a good case study for a good dam removal project. So I have for you, thanks very much for listening to this re-recording of the June 4th When Dams Go Bad presentation. Again, my name is John Roach, and you can reach me at the email address right there if you have more questions about dam removal projects. If you've got a project that you'd like to consider or you're working through, let us help be a resource to you all as you move that forward. And if you have any ideas to help funding for those dam owners who need help remediating their dams, always reach out. We love to pass along that information to help put all the project pieces together so they can move forward nicely. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.